A young woman wakes up in a cage after a terrible car accident, completely unsure of where she is or why. She has no fighting ability and no means to defend herself, and her rising panic makes her harder and harder for the player to control. She has to find ways to save herself from death or other awful fates, but how will she get out of this nightmare? Where did this game succeed, and why does it generate so much criticism, even among its niche fanbase? Hunting Ground was a game released by Capcom in 2005, a 3D game with a premise that was still fairly unique to games, if you don't count its 2D spiritual predecessors, where the main character is constantly being hunted down by prowling enemies and has to be ready to hide at any given moment, a trope revisited in later games like Hollow Cocoon and Resident Evil Village. It is especially unique in its panic mechanic, try to say that 5 times fast, in which the closer proximity Fiona has to being caught, the more she trips over her own feet, the screen distorts, and your controller refuses to cooperate, attempting to amplify frustration and fear and discouraging close misses with creatures chasing you. The lore is absolutely wonderful, taking you on a journey from playing a frightened kidnapping victim to an inheritor of a powerful soul essence who quickly picks up alchemy to keep herself safe from the lurking threats around her. And she has a dog. I love Huey so much, and I love the fact that he reacts to how you treat him over the course of the game. I might be obsessed with the fact that my love of petting him helped me avoid the bad ending in the game. He is an absolute superstar, and you can train him to help you with puzzles, distract enemies, and receive many, many pets.
Huey! Good boy.
All this to say, I really liked this game, and I want to make sure I have that known as a baseline. I wouldn't know nearly as much about this game as I do if I didn't. Because as the first Clock Tower, the aforementioned spiritual predecessor, got a remake, I found myself suddenly excited by the thought of a Haunting Ground reboot, and then I remembered the actual content of Haunting Ground and realized there is no way that's going to happen. Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how fucky-wucky this game is. We can begin, as the game did, with what Capcom did with the protagonist. Allegedly, Capcom added Huey out of a fear that people would not pick up a game with a female lead. They added him to help drive sales. Now, don't get me wrong, adding a dog to a game 100% works on me, and I'd have to assume most of the human population. And given the rarity of female protagonists in games so far, with a few obvious standout exceptions, it's not a completely insane fear to have. But it's still a foundation for what's so unsettling about it. Let's talk about the specific type of horror that this game embodies. This is a game about being a small, frightened, and vulnerable woman at its core. The writers wanted to capture a certain type of fear and level of perceived helplessness to carry over into the experience. This is not, unlike, see again, the Clock Tower series itself. It brings a particular type of horror to the table when it's revealed that Fiona's, reproductive organs are the key to most of the villains' main plan.
That, my dear, is what you will become in the future. Go ahead. You may touch it. You will be mine, Fiona.
As an aside, this is not a game stopper for me, but it would be, I don't know, nice if someone with these same set of organs was involved in the writing and or storytelling of this game. Maybe if there was a remake or retell, that would be a good thing to have. Reproductive horror and the loss of bodily autonomy is not at all a new theme to the genre. Alien, which I can't go a single video without talking about it seems, is an amazing and somewhat novel approach to this, with Cain being the first infected case to be subjected to the bodily horror of being attacked and forced to host something unwanted, even unknowingly, until it kills him. Pregnancy of all sorts plays into horror though. Rosemary's Baby, A Quiet Place, Bird Box, in many ways it's about powerlessness and helplessness. We can't all be Kazumi from Order of the Stick after all. And it's not an invalid way to strike and produce fear for anyone playing the character behind the screen. But please, for the love of God or whoever or whatever you believe in, do not make this your bad guy's main line.
Let me into your womb!
Damn it, Ricardo, I'm never going to be able to take you seriously again. If you do end the game without being kind enough to Huey to have him rescue you in prison, you do get a sick end that ends with you pregnant, which I think teaches the player an important lesson about treating our canine friends with kindness. In short, I don't think this is an entirely invalid way of inspiring fear, but I think it lays it on a little thick, especially considering the rest of the sexualization and oddities we're about to discuss. And I just want to doubly and triply emphasize that I never want to be made to hear "let me into your womb" ever again. I'm sorry, I can't. Okay. So what of the rest of the game? I find the first baddie you have to hide from to be one of the most interesting, but not without his problems. He's a failed alchemical experiment and is essentially a giant with the mind of a child named Debilitas. Yep, they basically named him Disability. Can't make this up. He sees you as a doll and will chase you around and try to play with you, though if he catches you, he essentially plays with you so hard he breaks and kills you. I think calling him Lenny would have been less on the nose here. This is an element of disability as horror, and overall, I don't think it was as necessary to the overall narrative than the other bosses are. And in the modern day, writers are hopefully trying to stray away from this because of how disability as horror affect people's views of real people that might have cognitive functioning delays or visible physical deviations from the average person. As someone whose own mental deviations thankfully only got me into Magic the Gathering and have turned any discussion about pathologic into an unskippable cutscene, I don't quite feel qualified to comment extensively on the nature of this writing, but I feel further research and reaching out to some more diverse writer staff would be what would be necessary to not cut the character altogether. I do like how you can spare him and he's just a bestie at the end of the game though. That was pretty cool. Alright, back to the weird sex stuff. The game uses sexualization as vulnerability in horror, starting early on with having Fiona being spied on as she changes clothes, which I feel is generally unnecessary to the whole needing to get bits of her soul motivation, but potentially understandable to emphasize the grossness of the game's villains and the fear that comes with being watched and sexualized, unable to do anything about it. But even though I love this game, I don't want people getting too comfy here, because I have one giant objection to the, well, that's all part of the horror experience argument. Let's look at the game's alternate costumes for Fiona. From the concept art of normal costumes, which seems to have a dire need to show her undergarments or as close to them as possible, to the actual outfits. Under the Scalpel, Texas Cowgirl, illegal in some states, and Fiona the Frog. Alright, this one's hilarious. It feels like it's not just the game's villains that are focused on sexualizing this character. This is my biggest fight against what the game's doing. When you blur the line between exposure as vulnerability and exposure as a way to get your female protag to dress with as little clothing as possible, you start to mess with it somewhat. Once again, something I'd like to see a more diverse design team that has power over art and writing direction to help with. I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with skimpy outfits, they just seem tonally off given the rest of the game's content. If the audience is encouraged to look at the protagonist the same way as the villains, we might need a genre change. Let's move on to the second boss of the game, Daniella, who I could totally fix if only given the chance. She's pretty, cold, and more than a little unhinged, all traits my therapist tells me to avoid in my dating life. But the most dangerous thing is she has her own obsession with what makes Fiona special. What we later learn is the potency of her is off. This might have the power to give Daniella life, real human life. This is really cool and is a definite motivation for going insane, chasing her down and trying to murder her. How's she planning on doing it? Some crazy alchemical ritual? Something not made obvious yet? Oh no. Wait. Daniella emphasized she wants to be a real woman and spends her time attempting to carve out Fiona's uterus. Again, makes sense as a horror concept, a bit outdated for sure, but I guess makes sense. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a bit weird given the makeup of the writing staff. Like, if me and people like me wrote a game where there's a bit where I revealed the maid was secretly like a ball bandit and would stop at nothing to get him, I'd want to make sure some people sharing that equipment would help me write it so I could make sure it was scary and not frankly ridiculous. Just a thought. Either way, I'm very salty she can't be saved the way Debilitas can, but that's probably because she's hands down my favorite character. I love her. We're getting married next week. From there, we move on to Ricardo. Fucking Ricardo. Hate that guy. He shot my dang dog. Everything I feel about Ricardo has honestly already been said, and in terms of the rest of it, he's captured well. He's a gross, nasty, evil man, and I'm glad we got to rid the world of him. To wrap it all up, I suppose, while this was an excellent game that did a unique job of capturing fear and letting us experience the growth of a woman who started off wide-eyed and helpless, and is now a powerful alchemist in her own right, I do urge game makers to diversify their staff in the modern day and really think about what they're trying to say with their mediums. Given the Reddit threads and talk points I've seen on this game, I don't think it's just the in-game weirdos that feel the need for Fiona to be in compromising and uncomfortable clothing and situations. Just know if you're setting something up to be evil, make sure the line between real and fake is clearly drawn. But that's my 2 cents. While I adored this game and its style, I worry that Haunting Ground itself might be lost to time in its cult following, though the reemergence of Clock Tower will certainly let us see where that's going. Please let me know what you think, like and subscribe if you enjoyed this retrospective, and I will see you in the Chaos Forest.